Will you pray with me? God, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be pleasing to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. This past week, I had the opportunity to teach Bible discovery at First Kids Camp. Bible discovery, in contrast to the other Bible curriculums I have taught in the past, invites children to not only hear the Bible stories, but to experience them. Throughout the week, kids searched the classroom for lost coins, crawled around on all fours like sheep, were tossed about to and fro by the waves, and witnessed Peter perform a miracle. On Tuesday morning, each class walked into a chaotic room where they were asked to help me prepare the space for Jesus. As is usually the case before guests come over to my house, there was just so much to do. I couldn't do it alone. The kids helped me by sweeping, making Play-Doh bread, washing vegetables, and setting the table for our house guests, all to prepare our space for Jesus' arrival. But as tiny hands bustled about the Bible discovery classroom, cleaning and preparing food, 4 of our crew leaders, who shall remain nameless, reclined on the sofa, eating popcorn and watching Moana. By now, I'm sure you've guessed that that morning we were learning about 2 sisters named Mary and Martha. Now, if you would have told me a year ago when I first came here that I would be teaching the story of Mary and Martha to 64 3 to 12-year-olds, I probably would have laughed in your face. Squirmy kiddos sitting on tape lines is a far picture from how I see contemplative Mary sitting peacefully at the feet of Jesus. Now, at first, each kid was so deep in their work that they didn't necessarily catch on to what was happening. But eventually, they would notice their crew leaders resting on the couch and know something was up. Curious eyes wanted to see what Miss Susan was watching. Tiny hands wanted to share popcorn with Miss Michelle. Tired bodies wanted to sit with Miss Chelsea. And the wise older kids wanted to pretend to be Mary with Miss Raquel. Rats, I told you I wasn't going to rat them out. Well, when asked what they wanted to say to their crew leaders, several reiterated that it simply wasn't fair. They should be helping too. Whether they caught on that they were acting as Mary or as Martha or not, one thing was clear. It simply wasn't fair. They wanted to watch Moana and eat popcorn too. I mean, who wouldn't? The story of Mary and Martha is brief, just 5 verses in Luke's gospel. It's just another day in the lives of 2 bickering sisters when news arrives that Jesus has entered into the town of Bethany and is coming to their house. A frenzy of chores and worries ensues as Martha, in true task-oriented form, sets out to ensure that Jesus feels both welcomed and comfortable in her home. She sets forth sweeping and cleaning and cooking, only the best for Jesus after all. And once Jesus arrives, Mary goes and sits at Jesus' feet, where the rest of the disciples sit. Meanwhile, Martha continues to go about all of the tasks needed to be accomplished. Luke does not tell us exactly what these tasks are, but if 13 weary travelers just walked into your home, I'll leave that up to your imagination. after a while of working and worrying and her sister being no help as usual, Martha goes up to Jesus to complain. She says, "Lord, don't you care? Don't you care that my sister has abandoned me to the kitchen? Tell her to lend me a hand." And this seems right. Though I love a good story of a woman willing to break social norms and take up a practice typically reserved for a man, let's be honest here. A task-oriented, overscheduled person, it just seems unfair. Why should one person in the household be doing all of the work while the other rests on her laurels? And almost without fail, during First Kids Camp, when I asked what they thought Jesus would tell Mary to do, they said he would tell Mary to get up and help her sister. This is the expected response. Yet Jesus takes us all by surprise and says, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by too many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken from her." And this is what always messes me up. How can Jesus tell Martha to stop doing what she's doing? How would anything ever get accomplished? How would Jesus tell Mary to stop showing how she shows love and hospitality? Was Jesus not aware of the 5 love languages that I had to read about? And anyone who chases kids around on a playground, dances alongside them in worship, and listens carefully to the stories of God's sightings in their lives, learns that the better part does not always look like the contemplative life. Surely you of all people know this, Jesus. Which got me thinking, what if there was more to that statement? In their book, Mindfulness, Finding Peace in a Frantic World, authors Mark Williams and Danny Penman contrast what they call doing and being modes. The authors write that when we're locked into doing mode, we often get caught up in our important career and life goals, in such demanding projects such as homemaking, childcare, and looking after elderly relatives. These goals, which are often worthwhile in themselves, but because they can become so demanding, take all of our focus. And it's tempting to focus on them to the exclusion of everything else, including your own health and well-being. Sound familiar? My heroine, Martha, was locked into this mode, unable to see that the albeit very important tasks set out in front of her were taking away from far more important life-giving things. The authors explain that being mode, in contrast, allows you to see how your mind tends to distort reality. It helps you step outside of your mind's natural tendencies to overthink, overanalyze, and overjudge. It restores balance by helping you sense the things that nourish you and the things that deplete your inner resources. It helps you sense the time you need to nourish your soul, and it gives you the courage and the space to do so. Now, tasks can be accomplished in both doing and being mode. The difference is, with being mode, one has a greater sense of what is important and thus life-giving. The authors say that one way of accessing this being mode is through mindfulness. Mindfulness is the practice of being fully attentive to the space around you. And there are many ways to practice. You can sit in your chair for 1 minute, paying attention to your breath, the breathing that comes in and out. You can also practice mindfulness by eating, one of my favorites. Slowly paying attention to each bite that you take, noticing the textures and the tastes, engaging all of your senses. The point is simple: to be fully engaged with your surroundings and with your senses. And mindfulness can be done just as well sitting still as it can be mopping the floor. The point is to be fully aware of your place on this earth and to do it out of your love for God. Now, one of the signs that you're operating in doing mode is by what the authors call mental time traveling, where we relive past events and refill their pain. Or we pre-live future disasters and pre-feel their impact. Mindfulness practices then draw you back to the present so you can be able to focus on what is right in front of you. So back to our Martha. I am convinced that Martha was fully operating in doing mode, pre-living future disasters. Up until this week, I was always convinced that Jesus' words were a rebuke. I thought Jesus was chastising Martha for working instead of being contemplative. This is how I was taught, after all. Brittany, stop being like Martha. You need to be more like Mary. Be still. Sit at Jesus' feet. That is the only way to experience God's presence. But after this week, I'm not convinced that's the case. You see, after a week of full speed going and doing and being with 64 young friends, I think the issue wasn't Martha doing too many things or being too hospitable. It is that Martha, in doing all of these things, got lost in the wrong headspace. Martha becomes so consumed with her worries that she forgets what hospitality is all about. Martha is so worried and distracted by what needs to be accomplished that she even neglects to acknowledge Jesus. That is, at least until she drags him into her sibling rivalry. Martha's worries and distractions leave no room for the most important aspect of hospitality: gracious attention to one's guests. Martha was doing the right things. She was serving the best way she knew how to serve. The problem was her head and her heart weren't quite there. She was functioning in doing mode and forgetting to find the balance that being mode can bring. So as I've come to see it, Jesus was inviting Martha into a deeper state of awareness. This wasn't condemnation. It was an invitation to something better, an invitation to the present. Jesus was drawing Martha out of her worry and back into reality, inviting her to remember the purpose of her hospitality, to be present with the one who gives life to all things. As an over-scheduled worrier, I have found, like Martha, it is far easier to dwell in future anxieties and past mistakes than it is to remain present. I need those constant reminders drawing me back to reality. I need voices of reason in my life whispering, "You are much more than what you accomplish. You are a child of God." Little faces have a great way of teaching you to be present. Maybe that's why this revelation came in the first place. For even in the midst of a chaotic classroom, when children were running around and trying to pick up paper and wash veggies for Jesus, I couldn't help but be fully there. Sure, a part of me envied those crew leaders on the couch. But at that moment, it seemed more likely to me that Jesus would have been fingers deep in Play-Doh as well. So the invitation, as I've come to see it, isn't to stop doing things. It's not to take up the contemplative life and to neglect all of our responsibilities, though we do need to work harder on finding that balance between work and rest. It's to remember why we do them, to maintain intentionality in all that we do, so that we might do each act as a gift to God, to learn to operate in being mode, to be present in our reality, rather consumed by our worries and distractions, and to listen to Jesus, saying, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things, but one thing is necessary. You are more than what you do. You are more than what you accomplish. You are a child of God. So come back to reality and be present with me." Amen.
Invite you to turn to 768. I Come with Joy. We'll sing the first three verses. If you don't recognize the tune, listen to it once and join us on the second time. I come with joy to meet my Lord, forgiven, loved, and free. In awe and wonder to recall his life laid down for me, his life laid